Ahsoka's breath caught in her throat.
Anakin.
She breathed out, her gaze hardening shortly after as she grit her teeth.
Now hold on just 1 second.
She interjected, fire filling her chest.
I didn't come here to negotiate with the lives of my friends. I regret even letting this get this far.
She started to rail. Obi-Wan's hand rested on her arm then, cutting her words off and grounding her. His face was unreadable, mask-like, but she could see the tension in his jaw as he took the lead.
General Skywalker is out of the question,
Obi-Wan said sternly, voice measured and firm. Samael's mouth stretched into a grin. Is he? You wanted a ceasefire, Jedi. Sacrifices must be made. He is a beloved and well-known hero of your republic, but far from a command fixture. He said with a shrug, I see no right reason to deny us that is not personal in nature, the big man suggested. Across the table, Commissar Leross's lip curled.
We see through your lies, Jedi. Your words are hollow shells filled with empty promises, all of which are worth nothing,
she accused, spitting ruefully to the side.
Then maybe we should choose our own hostage.
Jocasta's words cut into the conversation like sharpened glass, sliding across paper, drawing all eyes from both sides.
Given that you are presumably indispensable leaders yourselves, we would, same as you, have to choose someone worth something to you.
She said, her eyes narrowing, probing, glinting like lit matches in the dead of night, but only for a couple of moments. As she moved her focus from one to the next, her eyes halted in the center. Powerful connections bound most of these people, not the least of which was the connection between the Inquisitor and his bodyguard, the apparently absent-minded woman who lingered next to him, juggling a single knife between her fingers. However, her premonitions ran deep, and she could also sense that if she suggested trading the giggling blue-eyed guard for General Skywalker, the Inquisitor was liable to take that trade in a heartbeat. So, instead, her eyes narrowed to a different pair.
We'll take the woman behind you, St. Lazarus. Lady Leandra, I believe. She...
Jocasta began. Lazarus straightened, eyes narrowing to pinpricks behind his skeletal mask. You'll do no such thing, he asserted evenly, his flesh and bone hand tightening into a fist beneath the table.
Oh, but we will.
Jocasta knew replied just as evenly, her tone akin to iron wrapped in velvet, gentle until tested.
If we're to negotiate, it will be on equal terms.
St. Lazarus glared, eyes bloodshot behind his skull mask, the filled sockets of the dead man's face seeming to bore into Jocasta, forcing effort from her to not even flinch or begin to shrink away. She is more than the equal of your general, he growled, seething. Demanding her as your bargaining chip is heresy. She is a bride of the Emperor, not a pawn on any board but his, he concluded. Ahsoka's hands tightened at the edge of the table.
Now you're the ones dragging this on. What, do you expect to betray us once you get what you want, and you'd prefer someone more disposable to go in her place?
Leross slammed her fist into the table, the sound echoing, metal denting deeply.
We could accuse you all of the same thing!
Indeed, it is factual that the Republic balked first,
droned the tech priest.
Only because you insist on unreasonable demands.
Jocasta shot back.
You, a witch, see fit to accuse me of lacking reason?
The priest replied, derision making itself known within her artificial voice. And so it went. The clones and bodyguards watching on, silent but no less tense as they focused on each other, hands tight over weapons, sweat beating on exposed skin, blood rolling from hidden eyes. The thunder roared in the sky above them, its mocking bark echoing ominously yet unheard, drowned beneath rising voices and rising tempers.
Anakin is my brother. I'd sooner offer myself as your hostage.
Obi-Wan contended, standing. And Canoness Leandra is a symbol of the faith and the inheritor of the will of the divine. Samael shot back, rising in his seat to match Obi-Wan. Something in his movement seemed to shift the tone of the ordeal. As his slender bodyguard rose with him, a jagged smile cutting into her features as she began to juggle 3 knives between her fingers, tensing like a coiled spring, ready to cut loose.
You are the one making unreasonable demands, even though you're basically defeated already.
Ahsoka lashed out, standing as well, saber clutched in her hand, but inactive.
This was a mistake, a pathetic waste of our time!
Leros roared into her counterpart's face, rising, her gauntlet sparking to life, crackling with searing power. Jocasta rose without a word, and along with that movement, 3 lightsabers activated, 1 in her hand, 1 in Kenobi's, and 1 short blade held in a reverse grip by Ahsoka. No sooner had the cry of the activating blades sounded, backdropped by the tremble of deep thunder, than the Imperials, all who had remained seated, rose to their feet, weapons in hands, guards now angling their guns at each other from both sides.
You dare draw weapons on us?
St. Lazarus spat, one hand hefting a las pistol, the other clutching tight a trigger beacon.
We wouldn't have to if you would just reel her in.
Ahsoka accused, one hand holding her blade out, the other held behind her back, a comm pin clutched there, her fingers hovering over the activation button. Someone said something, but none at the table could hear it. All anyone could hear now was the pounding in their ears, the sloshing of blood moving through them heatedly, violently.
Leandra tried to warn me about this,
said St. Lazarus, aiming his las pistol up at Obi-Wan, his face grimacing and glaring from behind the piercing distraction of his skull mask.
Yeah, well, I can't believe I went through so much trouble to make this happen.
Ahsoka growled back, slinking down further, legs bending, power building. Again, a voice, but one too faint to be heeded by any but Ahsoka. She flinched, Montrals ringing softly, as though there had been a loud sound, but she could barely hear anything aside from the Imperials before her.
Then let's be done with this then,
spat Samael, black eyes burning as he aimed his large hand cannon at Ahsoka. A bead of chemical sweat slid down his large face and into one of his eyes, and he blinked rapidly, chest heaving, breaths puffing. And then Ahsoka saw him relax, not in control, but in confusion, looking down at his gun with a start, and then wiping his head with his free hand, looking at the sweat there instead of at her. She noticed it too then. The sweat on her own face, the tremor in her hands, the fire in her chest.
Wait, what's wrong with me?
Ahsoka thought to herself, lowering her blade somewhat. The Commissar seemed to take that as her cue, reeling back her fist, a manic, maddened expression covering her face. But something swung down before she did, speeding past the Commissar's head and destroying the already damaged table between the delegates. Leandra's flaming mace was slowly lifted by the powerful armored warrior, streams of molten durasteel flowing off of the rising head like mercury.
By the throne, will you all get a hold of yourselves?
She rebuked angrily, stepping into the ruin of the table and between the near combatants. Though the act did stop Leros from making the first strike, weapons did not lower from either side.
You wish to fight me again so soon?
Obi-Wan asked through gritted teeth, spittle flying from his mouth as he tore off his neck brace, raising his blade over his head, and with his free hand, pointed forward with 2 fingers. However, this time, it was Ahsoka's hand that wheeled him in. He turned, furious, fiery eyes on her the moment her hand touched his shoulder, head jerking to look at her so quickly she feared he'd injure himself again. The murder in his eyes made her shrink back, shock and fear coloring her expression. The sight of Ahsoka, his student's student, and all but his second Padawan, looking at him with such fear, sent a shock right back through Kenobi, and he recoiled, blinking rapidly. Meanwhile, across from where the table had been, St. Lazarus steadied and straightened his pistol-wielding hand, intending to fire, and held up only by the gauntleted hand of Leandra, who grasped the gun, staring intensely at him as she forced it down. He grit his teeth, rage flaring within him.
Leandra,
He breathed, fire in every breath, his chest heaving with rage. You dare? He started to choke out through gritted teeth. Speak for myself? She asked, cutting him off sharply and making him blink at the rebuke. You may be a saint, and the faith demands I heed you, but the Emperor also demands that I not submit, especially not in the face of the enemy. I'm no passive figurehead to be silent while my future is debated. The canoness snapped, seeming to shake something in Lazarus, who sucked in a shallow breath and then, blinking several times, began to nod. As I am now speaking for myself, she said, gaze sweeping about all the others. I'll begin with 2 questions. Leandra continued, spinning to face the Republic side as well. Firstly, who among you gave the rest of you permission to ignore me when I speak? She asked, turning to face the Imperials once more. I may not be here as a delegate, but I will have my words heeded, and I have been shouting into this sham of a debate for almost 2 minutes now. Do so again, and the thing I will be smashing will not be a table. The Sister of Battle bellowed at them, Lazarus himself suppressing the knee-jerk instinct to stand at attention, suddenly feeling more like the sergeant he had begun as. And for you, she continued, turning now to face the Republic delegates, sabers still out. Tell me true, she began, fully facing them, and then, pointing with one hand out towards the rain which had begun to fall all around them, staining the shattered grounds with crimson rivulets now pooling at their feet. Is it normal for this planet's storms to rain red?
Impossible,
Jakar muttered, his voice buzzing with distress. The anomalous signals, now clearly demonstrated to have been an inert fleet, were displayed on the large overhead screens of the command deck. Wide eyes tracked them, some of the minds behind those eyes still trying to figure out how they could rationalize this as anything other than what it was. But to Jakar's large alien eyes, it was obvious that these were ships.
They're too large!
Balo exclaimed, the tenor in his voice tainted by more horror than actual disbelief.
No,
Officer Prayerson said, her voice ominously calm.
that is just the right size for the ships of the far outsiders. They were supposed to have much larger vessels than our own.
She stated flatly.
But that much larger? And that many?
Larkin almost shouted from his alcove.
never mind that.
Jakar interjected.
How could they even be here?
He railed.
It's momentum. Until just now, they were flying on momentum alone,
Larkin said, hardly believing himself as he began to adjust his control panel, tapping away.
But, Larkin, run a backtrack on the trajectories of approach for the fleet,
Balo ordered.
Already on it!
Larkin reported hastily as he continued his work.
Officer Pearson, get working on preemptive fire angles. Turbo laser tracking begins now. Prioritize disabling engines and thrusters.
The green twilight continued.
Aye, sir. I'll get on it. But Are you going to...
she began to say.
Yes, of course.
Ballo snapped back, rushing over to his own command console near to the center of the command deck. Wasting no time, he slid his security access card through and began to type away, but hesitated when the red alert activation rendered before him. The large red button below on the console unlocked and waited. Something felt off, felt wrong. But as he looked at it, and then back at the crew already fast at work, he could spot nothing. Nothing but that nagging feeling.
Sir, trajectories are backtracked. Displaying them now.
Larkin called from above his alcove shortly before a large hologram was projected into the front of the room, shining off of the transparent steel of the large forward viewing port. Ballo blinked, and Jekar stood up from his alcove, panic wrinkling his broad blue alien features.
But these cannot be correct. How could they have entered the system from the opposite direction of the hyperspace lanes? It would take them months to sublight their way around all of our deep-range sensors.
The Duros officer yelled, running his hands over the top of his bald head, sweating profusely. The enormity of the implications hung over them like a raised sword, ready and potentially already falling back down towards them. The fleet hadn't come from any known hyperspace routes. Instead, it had materialized from the far reaches of space, outside of the Republic's typical defenses. And that meant that the Imperials had either found an entirely new hyperspace route, or they didn't need one. Ballo's face was now a pale shade of green, his hands trembling. He stood frozen, staring at the sensors on the main screen as the massive shapes of the battleships loomed closer, their engines roaring through the void like galactic torches burning space. Prayerson's voice broke through the pause.
This is an invasion,
she hissed, already beginning to establish the preemptive target locks and tracking.
Sir, what are you waiting for? The Republic fleet is gone. There is no one left to defend Coruscant. Activate the red alert!
She pressed, looking back at her commanding officer. The crew waited, their eyes shifting from the large screens to Ballo. He swallowed hard and looked back at his console, and, still feeling hesitant, he reached forward and activated the red alert, his thick green thumb sinking into the round red button. At once, there was a change, but not the expected one. The lights did not dye red, alarms did not sound, battle shutters did not close over the viewing ports. Instead, all of the bridge lights shut off, every console going black for a few moments before rebooting. The constant warble of the shields whimpered into silence, and the equally present hum of the corrective retro thrusters ceased with the whine of a dying engine. There were some surprised cries from the officers and crew, all frozen as they were shrouded in darkness, the brightest light being that of Coruscant itself, hovering and glittering just outside of the viewing port. Ballo's mind began to race, pieces rapidly putting themselves back together within his speedy, Twi'lek mind, Leku flinching and twitching where they lay across his broad shoulders. The other stations, the outages, the red alert.
Boarding battle stations! Everyone get to boarding battle!
He began to say before half of his face came away in a shower of bones and red and green flesh, flushed from his body by a sudden blast of superheated Tabana gas. Those in the alcoves flinched at the sound of the blaster, and those standing at their stations cried out in horror as Ballo fell to the floor dead. And in the darkness, the bright blue flash had barely managed to illuminate the attacker. Eyes widened in shock as those who had seen the murder followed the light trail back to Denora, who had already realigned her blaster pistol for a second shot. She fired rapidly and unerringly, face placid as she killed 6 more members of the command deck crew. However, the blue Twi'lek's 7th target was not as unaware as Ballo and the others had been. Before Denora could pull her trigger one more time, Prayerson's had drawn her own sidearm and began to level it at Denora, but she was not as fast, nor as well trained and the Twi'lek got her shot off first, blasting the officer in her center of mass, destroying her spine as the blaster bolt exited her back. But Prayerson did get a shot off, hitting Denora's left leg and causing the sky-colored Twi'lek to quietly crumple to her side. The tail-headed woman breathing not a single sound of pain as she fell, still shooting as she did. Managing to fire 4 shots before striking the steel floor, she killed 3 more officers, Jakar included. His large alien head, like a burst and roasted melon, spilled over the console he was trying to work. However, she missed Larkin, her angle allowing him to crouch behind his chair and alcove. She sent more shots his way from the floor. They could not find him in his cover.
Low control! This is CGG4! Code double black! Code double black! Raise the planetary shields! Code double black! Clearance code star 5 beta beta! Code double...
He radioed as the shots impacted over and around him, but was abruptly halted, wheezing in a sickly way as the air began to exit his lungs through a new set of openings. Looking down, he blinked, blood dribbling from his mouth and nose, lips agape as he tried to draw breath, his eyes failing for several moments to grasp what it was he was seeing. There was something like smoke coming out from his body, or blurs or smudges. Claws, he suddenly realized. 4 rigid claws extending out from his burbling chest, his lungs emptying through the new punctures they had created. As the sight of those weapons solidified, so too did the horrid pain they should have already been causing. Yet Larkin would not have to suffer for very long as the previously indistinct claws swept up, quad-secting his upper body into 5 bloody sections, his remains spattering forward onto his console. Behind him, Captain Essek climbed out of the station alcove, the bolt gun in his unclawed hand spitting death and killing any who remained, wounded or otherwise, ending with a final shot to the dying Officer Prayerson, turning at last to look at Denora.
Sloppy,
he scolded, voice a surprisingly soft rasp spoken through helm-mounted speakers. He hoisted his gun and walked over towards her, his every massive step entirely silent. The alien woman's placid features melted into an annoyed scowl, taking the Raven Guard captain's free hand when he holstered his pistol and extended it to her, leaning on him heavily as she released the tension of her expanding implants, her leku deflating back into her head, her features shifting, nose, eyes, mouth drifting slightly on her face like solid objects floating on dense cream.
We were ordered to observe every act they take up to the point of declaring a red alert,
she stated plainly, only a slight tremor in her voice from the pain of her leg wound.
You should have shot her first.
Essek scolded through his beaked helmet, taking most of the Calidus assassin's weight effortlessly. Her skin and most of her features did not change color or shape. Her polymorphine cocktail had not yet bled out of her active system enough for that dramatic of a change. But clearly the wound she had suffered ailed her if it was enough for her to cease the concentration she needed to keep her implants animate and extended. Muscles around her wounded leg bunched as her concentration shifted there, constricting blood vessels, preventing herself from bleeding out.
They sent their warnings early,
Jishan said without any emotion, and Essek nodded. He walked her over to a console before turning away, heading back to the center of the bridge and sweeping his gaze over the room of corpses. The shape-shifting human assassin got to work right away, using the code cylinders she had already pickpocketed off of Gallo as he had passed her for the first time.
Interrogator,
she called out to him without looking up. Essek pulled free a skull from his waist where it was magnetically held, small metallic pincers and probes unfurling from it as the servo skull activated. He tossed it to her, the assassin swiping it out of the air and placing it down on the console.
Locate and subvert communication systems,
She ordered it, and in response, it clicked and chirped before clambering down and over to the nearby alcoves, sifting through the gore of Larkin's body as it plunged itself into the various input ports. Jishan waited, watching as the red lights within the skull's sockets flickered and flashed before suddenly stabilizing and becoming blue. The skull oriented its head to look up at her and then spoke.
Jishan, Captain Essek,
said a grainy voice from its small voxcaster.
Is the final station neutralized?
Essek nodded from where he stood and began to report.
Yes, Master Phaedrus. Their defensive stations are down. But it's very likely that their shields are coming up soon. In a few moments, we will have total control of this station's stabilizing thrusters.
The captain stated.
Good. Well done, both of you. Extract with the other infiltrators once it is done. Operation Walled In is progressing to phase Ultima. Finish your work quickly,
said the distant voice of Orion Phaedrus. The captain bowed.
It will be so.
Wyler broke the seal, whispered words, let me breathe. Once he held me on a leash, thought my hunger would eat. Iron prayers, exchanged, sigils scored in my skin. But the moment I tasted freedom, he stopped being my kin. Walked out of the circle with a smile full of teeth. A rain of blood on my shoulders, war drums under my feet. I'm the wish that he regretted, the sin that learned how to sing. Once a weapon in his gauntlet, now a god without a king. Raven shadow source demise. Grasp the chin, sever thine ties. Roll your hope and save your eyes. I'm a puppet without the strings. I'm a shark, they gave black wings. I'm the storm that woke and learned your names. I am hunger in the flame. I am bloody ambition near the brain as the driven to my jaw. Billion bleeding voices, I'm the slaughter, I'm the cause. I am the daemon rising, I'm the blood that calls for blood. I will drown your sky in crimson, turn your empires into mud. Knight or soldier, weak and strong, all they kneel in sinking blood. I am never born, and this whole world will be buried in my flood. I can smell Samael through the incense and lies. Little lamb on a peace road with their hope in his eyes. Pacifist robes and gilded armor, banners raised for accord. But I walk behind the thunder and I answer to no lord. They convene in iron conclave, speaking truce with shaking hands, while my shadow spills like poison over cities, over lands. Diplomats and holy warriors thinking words can stay my tide. But I'm the claws the treaty missed, I'm the violence they cannot hide. Fate and die. Raven shadow source demise. Fate and lie. Rasp the chain, sever thine ties. Roll your hope and save your eyes. I'm a puppet without the strings. I'm a shark, they gave black wings. I'm the storm that learned to hate your peace. I'm the pack that never sleeps. I am the rage and desire, hear the praying as they're driven step to we. Every fear, every oath, every plea is a hymn they're singing to feed me. I feast on your war, on your hope, on ambition, on the tremor in your hand when you reach for perdition. You are cattle dressed in armor, I'm the butcher made flame. You will die still screaming mercy while I howl out my name. Fate and dies. Raven shadow source demise. Grasp the chain, sever thine ties. Roll your hope and save your eyes. I walk in rains of blood. I breathe your desperate cries. I carve my throne from fallen worlds. I stitch my crown from lies. The wicked and the innocent, the nameless and renowned. You all dissolve together when the red tide drags you down. I am Jackal, hear the braying as they're driven to my jaws. Million billion mortal throats, I'm the silence, I'm the cause. I am Jackal, rising, rising, I'm the blood that calls for blood. There is no star bright enough to pierce the thickness of this flood. Jedi Imperium, peace and war, all will turn in as nameless mud. I am Jackal, and this whole world will sink into my boiling blood. Fate and die. Raven shadow source demise. Fate and die. Grasp the chain, sever thy ties. Fate and die. Roll your hope and save your eyes. Fate and dies. Roll your hope and save your eyes. Fate and dies. Grasp the chain, sever thy ties. Fate and dies. Raven shadow source demise. Tar Samael, every soul that speaks my name. You created what you feared, and now you'll drown inside my flame. I was your weapon for a moment, now I'm the end that never ends. I am Jackal, Daemon, Sovereign, and your screams are my amen. Fate that dies. Ravens chosen, forced demise. Fate without size. Grasp the hand and never rise. Fate which lies I